12 years on YouTube, and today is my 1000th public upload to the YouTube platform. I've been uploading to YouTube since 2013, living in 7 different states, circling the country twice, and consistently uploading mainly kayak fishing content. And now we're here in 2025. Things have changed in many ways, and I really can't put into words what these past 12 years have meant to me without telling the entire story. So, let's start from the beginning. Okay, now before anyone calls me out, if we're getting technical, I actually started uploading videos to YouTube in 2008, 2009, but it wasn't fishing related. Yeah, so we're not going to count those. Okay, so now that we've got that out of the way, let's fast forward to 2013, which was my second year of kayak fishing, but my first year of filming and uploading to YouTube. I got a GoPro, a laptop, and a little green kayak that my mom actually got me for Christmas from Amazon, which was on Prime, free shipping, win-win, and it was awesome. Now, I'm not going to lie, those first uploads for the first year or two, pretty cringy. My fishing abilities definitely were subpar, and the fish handling was actually quite poor as well. But hey, I fell in love with it. It got me off the bank, which was all I knew growing up. I was a bank angler, bank fisherman. I'd find anywhere that had access to the water to wet a line and hopefully catch some fish. And now, with that little green kayak, I was able to explore waters I had no prior access to. And yes, it led to catching a bunch of fish. Well, the next year in 2014, it wasn't much better content-wise, and still continued with ridiculous music and edits. Though, one big upgrade was a brand new native watercraft, Slayer Propel 13. I had finally joined the working force as a travel physical therapist, graduating from school, and was making some money, and decided to splurge on a nicer kayak. The one thing that I wanted in a kayak was the ability to cover more water. That little green kayak was cool, but I did have to paddle it, and it kind of was a big plastic barge. So I remember thinking, what if they made kayaks out there with like pedals? I could essentially pedal it around like a bicycle on the water. So I got on Google, I typed in pedal kayaks, and 2 search choices came up. Well, I liked the one that had both forward and instant reverse, so I picked the native watercraft kayak. By this time, and if people have caught on, I had been posting in some pretty random places throughout the country, mainly the Northeast. Like I stated, I graduated school, I was a physical therapist, but specifically a travel physical therapist, so pretty much I had the luxury of picking wherever I wanted in the country to go work for 2, 3, 4 months at a time and then move on. First couple of years, I really hadn't traveled too far from my roots in New York, staying in the Northeast, but that was all about to change when I decided at the start of 2015 I'd make my way to Austin, Texas. Which maybe was one of the most revolutionizing moments for me, fishing-wise and YouTube-wise, as it introduced me into the bigger tournament scene of kayak fishing, right in the heart of downtown Austin, Texas. That's where I got involved in the Kayak Angler Tournament Series, also known as CATS, and absolutely fell in love with it. Fell in love with that, fell in love with the tournaments, the people, the scene. It was truly an amazing thing to be a part of. That season, fishing the CATS Series, man, caught a bunch of big fish, fished new bodies of water, actually won the Angler of the Year title for that series, and really discovered that Texas is the best place in the country to fish. And quite honestly, I'm surprised in 2015 I just didn't settle down right there in Central Texas. But I didn't. I continued as a travel physical therapist, traveling the country. There wasn't much left in 2015 other than leaving Texas. I spent some time off in New York doing some fishing, and even did a short stint in the Boston area where I did fish a few times, including one tournament with the Boston Bass Stranglers, which I totally bombed in. 2016 was an interesting year. It was a big decision and definitely went back and forth with it multiple times, but I decided right after Christmas, I'd pack up the truck, in the middle of a snowstorm of course, and drive out to the Golden State, way out west, California, specifically Southern California in the desert of Palm Springs. Now fishing-wise, maybe not my best decision because I was either driving 3+ hours to fish a body of water or getting access to local golf course ponds, which wasn't actually too bad. It was the first year I decided I'd flip my kayak in 48-degree water temps, lose my phone and most of my gear, and looking back at the situation, nearly killed myself. But luckily, I'm still here today and gotta still thank those guys in the white nitro who actually rescued me that day and brought me back to the ramp. Still don't know who they are, but if there's any chance they are watching out there and you remember me in that orange kayak and you saved me, I thank you from the bottom of my heart. Yes, it was actually good times fishing in the desert, and surprisingly, I did catch quite a few fish from the bank, from the ponds, as well as kayak fishing the Colorado River, and even getting access into a private lake and catching my PB at the time. We can put an asterisk next to that one. Closing out my time there, I was actually able to get in my first ocean experience on a day charter with my coworker Raul. There was a bunch of us, but I did get lucky and managed to catch a yellowtail, which made me realize how strong fish actually are compared to bass. I think that day they kept referring to me as New York, but it was a cool experience, and I got to keep the yellowtail, and my coworker made some killer ceviche. After my job contract was up in Palm Springs, it was time to move on, and I always had the California Delta, Northern California, as a bucket list fishery. Ever since in high school, I always saw it on Bassmaster, on ESPN, seeing big Delta giants being caught, seeing Aaron Martins win. That was always a bucket list fishery for me. So that's what I did. I moved up to Northern California, which also one of my best friends from high school was living in San Francisco, so seeing him and catching up was a bonus. By the way, shout out to the Kaiser Bar, or Kaiser Bar, not sure how you say it. Frequented that a couple of times for some soccer games with my buddy Matt, and man, they've got some killer wings. Anyways, as a travel physical therapist in Northern California, you never know exactly how long you'll be working or if it's cut short. This one was cut short. This one only lasted a month and a half, but I absolutely fell in love with the Delta. Big fish eating frogs, or really seemingly whatever bait I put in front of them, they were eager to chomp it. I was a fishing machine. When I wasn't working, I was definitely fishing, and even got to fish out of a local guy's boat, buddy named Josh. As we went fishing, I pretty much watched him catch a bunch of giants where I'd pick up the scraps. The point being though, I saw what the Delta was capable of and the fish that swam in it. Right before I left, I actually was able to compete in my first tournament in California for Yakabass, which definitely included some of the OGs of the Cali tournament scene, some of which are still around today. So as my time was ending, my job was ending in Northern California, I got an amazing opportunity back in New York in the Adirondack Mountains, working at a local hospital and staying right on the water. Couldn't pass that up, so I packed my bags, loaded up the kayak in the truck, hit the road from California all the way to the Adirondack Mountains in New York, a smooth 43-hour drive to finish out my summer. And man, will I tell you, that was an awesome couple of months up there. Having an entire lake house to myself, fishing from the kayak, and also taking a camping trip with my buddy Mike from college and a coworker I had at the time for some pretty cool sights and a memorable weekend of camping and fishing. That job stint with the overall accommodations may have been my favorite overall as a travel PT because of how unique it was, but it did come to an end, and I ended up going back home in central New York where I'd continued to fish some local tournaments, do some weird challenge videos, and then I got a job there at a nearby hospital for the remainder of the fall and winter before I made my next move. In February 2017, after enduring a winter of still uploading to YouTube consistently, but being in New York, I'd say more secondary fishing content with unboxings, Throwback Thursday videos, and random stuff just to pass the time, I finally packed up the truck, drove away from New York down to East Texas where I was working in Hemphill, right smack dab between Toledo Bend and Sam Rayburn. Ironically, during my time there, I never fished either of those bodies of water. However, I did fish some other nearby fisheries, lakes, and honestly had some of the most epic fishing days of my life there, including probably to this date the best fishing day of my life, catching a limit of 5 bass for 110 inches, estimating to weigh over 30 pounds. So yeah, that was pretty good. Anyways, epic fishing in East Texas, a short stay though overall, and I decided I really miss California, specifically the Bay Area, the Delta. Just felt like my time there prior year was cut too short and I didn't get to experience the whole deal. So that's where I lined up my next PT job, and if anyone's still wondering, at this point I'm still working a full-time job. But of course, before making my way back to California, I had to make a pit stop for a week-long stay back in Austin where I'd catch up with some old friends, get a brand new kayak, which happened to be the biggest kayak I've ever fished out of, and how I ever managed to get that up and down from my racks on my truck, I will never know, but we did it. And then that week, of course, we did some fishing around the Austin area, did some filming. It was all pretty epic, though living in a motel for a week, maybe not so much. After that week in Texas, I made my way to California, and boom, 30 hours later, we're there, renting a room right in Discovery Bay where, little did I know at the time, a future good friend and ambassador of the Delta would be living just around the corner, unbeknownst to me. Was on the water again, actually hit 10K subs on YouTube, big milestone for me. Did a giveaway on the backyard dock, and little did I know, that right there, that move would be the last time I made a big significant move as a travel PT, and essentially would plop my butt right in Northern California in the East Bay. And though I would still pick up jobs and assignments throughout the area, yeah, never moved again and ended up being adopted as a California resident. It ended up being a great decision because 2017 already had started pretty fantastic, but things were just getting better. I was able to join the Yakabass Tournament Series once again and finish out their season with them, with my first tournament being at Lake Comanche, a lake that I would grow to love and hate. Actually, scratch that, mainly hate, but that's besides the point. Anyways, Comanche was our first tournament of the year, or my first tournament of the year, and it would actually be the tournament, the day, the moment where I'd first meet Mike Ensign and Alden Walden. I can't say we hit it off right away, but we introduced ourselves and we made plans for all three of us to do some camping at our next tournament in Clear Lake, since all of us kind of were new to the scene, didn't know many people, and we're all in the same boat. So next tournament, Clear Lake, where we camp together. And when I say camp, I mean sleep in the parking lot of the Canocti Casino and eat subpar food that gave us some serious GI issues. But that weekend at Clear Lake with Mike and Alden, I would say, was the defining moment, the defining weekend that our fishing crew officially started. Essentially, after realizing we all like fishing, we all like drinking beer, and we all like staying up way too late and doing average to poor in a tournament. It was a match made in heaven. 2018, obviously still in California, but now feeling a bit more settled, having made some good friends and having the full season of Yakabass kayak circuit ahead of us. We were all pumped. We were excited. We wanted to fish hard, but more importantly, have a good time throughout the year. I did end up getting rid of my giant Titan 13.5 that I had picked up from Austin at the end of 2017, and in 2018, got the new native watercraft Titan 10.5 from Dan at Headwaters Kayak in Lodi, which I don't want to skip over because Dan and his crew at Headwaters were instrumental, or whatever word you want to call it, for playing a huge role in significance in the kayak fishing industry, especially fishing out here in Northern California. It was a great shop, they were a great crew, they were great to me and my friends, and though they aren't located in that particular location anymore, at the time I was able to get my kayaks shipped there and picked up, and that's what we did that day. Dan and myself took out the new native watercraft Titans, got on the water, did some testing, little obstacle course, and boom, I was ready for tournament season. I'm not gonna lie, it was fun traveling around California with the guys, and honestly, we were probably having too much fun more often than not.
I don't even know how he fished today. For anybody that was with us last night,
But that was only the beginning of what would become some epic road trips and travel for tournaments across the country. That spring, Alden, Mike, and myself decided to make the trek to the KBF National Championship on Kentucky Lake. Actually, to clarify, just so the guys won't get mad, I attended my buddy's bachelor party in New Orleans right before the tournament, so Mike and Aldi graciously drove by themselves and picked me up halfway along the route. But man, that was a fun week, full of highs, full of lows, all of our first major tournament, and if you guys have been following us over the years, you'll probably know that our group were no stranger to shenanigans, especially during the tournament weekend, but it was a great trip. Mike was the only one to cash a check. I think he made top 80, but we did see a dude win $100,000 for finishing first, winning the KBF National Championship. So that was incredible. That was amazing, and just kind of solidified that the kayak fishing scene, the tournament scene, the sport had a lot of momentum, was growing, and we kind of felt like it was here to stay. After we all drove back from Kentucky, I personally just continued to fish and do more tournaments. Now we're starting to hang out with Obidi a little bit more, though I had met him a few times prior, so it was cool to start fishing and getting to know O. To be honest, I actually already knew who O was from old school, OG original YouTube days, talking 18, 19 years ago. You look at fishing videos from them, you're only going to find a few people, and Obidi was one of them. And I also remember him from FLW Circuit Breaker at the time with Mark Daniels Jr. So getting to meet O and become friends with him in person was really cool. Couldn't imagine what O and I would do, especially on this channel, with some really cool content. Not to mention a lot of broken boats and the legend of root beer being established. Root beer!
Oh, root beer there? You ain't never had no problem. Root beer, what happened?
As we continue to fish these tournaments, we met a lot of cool, like-minded people and started to get a regular crew going. Always showing up to these tournaments a day or two early, camping out, having a good time, and we even started doing the pre-tournament derbies with the iconic trophy up for grabs. It was actually my first time ever really putting cameras on other people and putting them on the channel, but it was cool to mix it up for the channel and the content. It was a fun rest of the summer and fall. I actually did my first UFC Ultimate Frog Challenge tournament that year with Josh, the guy from the boat, during my first stay in California. He was still living here at the time, so did it with him. Like it always happened, he ended up catching a giant. I picked up a few scraps, and we actually did place and received a small plaque. We also went back to Clear Lake that summer, which was our second year. And by the way, just to make myself and everyone else feel super old, we have plans to go to Clear Lake actually right after this video, and it's going to be our 9th trip. My God. But yeah, that summer was our second time up there. Got a big old house, bunch of people stayed in it, which was nice, not sleeping in the casino parking lot and eating suspect burgers. It was also the first time I really hung out with Terrence, aka Beer Santa, as he stayed there that weekend, and wouldn't you know, that weekend he brought a bunch of presents, more specifically a load of beer. But another fun year at Clear Lake, and the rest of 2018 was pretty cool too. Caught more big fish, including my first salmon with my buddy Rob Matsura, though it took me way too long to get it in. I had a plane suspiciously dump pellets on me after circling me like 10 times, which that was an odd moment. Did my first ocean trip out in the kayak for lingcod, and fished a few more derbies, hanging out with the fellas, also trying my first balut, which, by the way, was also the last time I had it as well. 2019 may have been my best tournament year I've ever had fishing from the kayak, though it didn't start off so great after I decided to lop off a chunk of my thumb just before the season started. We started off at Lake Berryessa. Most of the crew was there for a fun weekend of fishing, and this tournament may have been when it all started and I was dubbed the last minute heroics guy. As last hour of the tournament, I hit the jackpot after not catching hardly anything all day. Ordering practice, I found an offshore hump loaded with fish and salvaged what would have been a skunker into a top 10. But our good fortune wouldn't stop there. The next tournament up at Lake Shasta for the Hobie BOS series, my thumb was just about healed, and after a mediocre day 1, day 2 on Championship Sunday, I made a huge comeback, putting up probably my biggest limit ever on Lake Shasta, 87 inches, including a kicker fish with literally 30 minutes left in the tournament that would be the deciding fish, the tiebreaker fish, to win that event and claim my first victory ever in California, as well as qualify for the Hobie BOS Tournament of Champions in Arkansas, slated for later that year. The tournament momentum didn't stop there though. The fellas and I made our way across the country to Louisiana to fish another KBF National Championship event on Lake Caddo, and man oh man, that was incredible. A place that compares to nothing else that I've ever seen. A giant swamp essentially filled with big hungry bass. And after 2 days of tournament fishing and being in the middle of the pack, we had 1 day left, which, wouldn't you know, the last minute heroics guy put it together, caught nearly 100 inches of bass on the final day, jumped all the way into 3rd place out of 400 some people for a solid payday, and to be honest, it was a huge surprise finishing that high and just a crazy way to end our trip. That spring was the first spring I had gotten a proper kayak to visit back home in New York, which you guys probably know has turned into a yearly tradition, and that was the spring that turned into some absolutely epic fishing and really opened my eyes as to how good it was in the Finger Lakes in the springtime. Getting back to California after an epic trip in New York, we had a fun summer, including an epic group battle on New Melones, where Brandon Miller, aka Bam, had the famous words that will continue to echo throughout the YouTube universe.
Oh yeah, baby, that's a tank. That's steel top. No! 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 No!
Yeah, losing a DD, and not to brag too much, but I did take another win, even though it was a small derby, and claim the pre-tournament derby trophy. We fished Clear Lake once again and had a great time as always, and while the tournament didn't go so well for me, I did discover that Clear Lake has apparently some massive catfish. Going into the fall, got another win out on the Delta with what would have been, still to this day, my personal best, punching a hyacinth clump and performing perhaps one of the worst landing jobs ever. It was 8 pounds, 11 ounces ounces, 24.75 inches, and I'm still wondering to this day if my scale was broken. That tournament wasn't straightforward. It actually took me to the last 30 minutes of that day to get my 5th fish for a limit, but luckily, being the last minute heroics boy, we made it happen, got our 5th, and got the win for that day. We finished off 2019 not so much on a high note finish-wise, but we did travel to Arkansas for the TOC on Lake Ouachita from the Shasta tournament that qualified us, and although we didn't have a great finish, it was quite the adventure and an experience to say the least. Well, this year will be marked in history as the one that changed everyone's, and I mean everyone's, lives. I started out that year posting a video not knowing what would come of this world in a few months. Obviously could never predict it, but that spring of 2020, the world turned upside down. Now, before that happened, we did start off the year with a nice trip to Chico, California, visiting the Sierra Nevada brewery, as well as having a friendly competition amongst the friends, but little did I know that would be the last time I'd see them for months on end. My next big tournament is when everything changed. I traveled to Lake Fork in Texas for a Bassmaster event, actually at the same time the MLF pros were there. And while we were fishing the tournament that weekend, that is when the world went into full panic mode, resulting in quarantines, lakes shutting down, long lines to the grocery store, and a lack of toilet paper. We finished our kayak tournament, but MLF actually had canceled theirs, and I remember going to the airport, DFW, to get my flight home to California, and the airport was empty. It looked like a ghost town, kind of creepy. I got on my flight, got back to California, and yeah, I don't have to tell you, you guys know what the rest of the year, what history looks like after this point. While a lot, if not most of all, the lakes were shut down here around me in California, I still managed to get out and fish places like the Delta, and honestly having some pretty epic days catching some big old fish. With lack of places to fish, some that were still open like Lake Shasta, I remember making single day trips, spending 8 hours on the road to and from Shasta just to get fishing. And I'll tell you, it was actually some amazing fishing and well worth the drive. That spring, I caught a lot of big fish and had some of my better days on the water, including some pretty epic striper bites with some bonus catch and cooks with our buddy Aldi Waldy. Now, our first tournament back for that year was all the way into the summer in June, and it was amazing. It was amazing to finally get back to the crew, get a little normalcy in our lives again. And for that tournament, Lady Luck hit me once again. I somehow pulled off some key catches throughout the day and got the win for our first tournament back of 2020. That entire summer was interesting, to say the least. We had a Hobie BOS tournament that had an insane lightning storm on the Delta, which I was nearly struck by had I not decided to get off the water 5 minutes prior. And with that crazy lightning storm, that unfortunate event actually set a good part of Northern California ablaze during that hot and dry summer, leading to catastrophic wildfires across the state. We still went up to Clear Lake that summer, and although it was pretty smoky from all the fires, the bite was absolutely epic. And I even managed to pull some last minute heroics in the Bassmaster Clear Lake event, which, by the way, is the painting sent by a viewer years ago over my left shoulder, which is killer. But that fish was very important in that it actually qualified me, it placed me for the Bassmaster Championship event the following year in Texas on Lake Possum Kingdom. 2021 started out pretty sweet. I did move out of the tiny little space I had been living in for the better part of 4 years and moved into a bigger space with an actual garage for all things fishing related, and actually through the help of my buddies Ramel and Travis was able to convert it into a pretty sweet space now referred to as the Bass Cave. Also, that year we hit 100,000 subscribers on YouTube and got the old silver plaque, which is pretty cool. Early in the year I went down to San Diego with a buddy to fish a tournament, and well, yeah, that didn't go so well. But the rest of the spring was pretty good to me. Caught some giants out on the Delta, watched a buddy catch an absolute behemoth of a striper, and had another epic spring trip in New York. Though I will say the highlight of that spring was a Bassmaster tournament we had up again at Clear Lake, where Mike and myself both finished in the top 10, which would qualify us for the following year's Bassmaster Kayak Championship, all the way across the country in South Carolina. But more on that later. So yeah, before we could think about that, I still went to Texas for the Bassmaster Championship on Possum Kingdom that I qualified from last year, and let's just say my run of good luck, good fortune, good tournament results came to a solid halt and end right there. However, that summer was a fun one. Got to fish my first Ultimate Frog Challenge with O in the famous root beer, and there started the tradition of the epic boat fails and breakdowns. We also did a group trip celebrating Aldi Waldy's bachelor party up in Palo Cedro at an Airbnb with a private pond where I caught the lake record, and everyone pretty much got annihilated, and we all have little to no recollection of what actually happened that weekend other than what I posted on YouTube. Jumping all the way into 2022, our group went up to Oroville to fish a tournament and of course pay our dues to the brewery courtesy of Beer Santa. But what was also cool was that Mike and I, who remember qualified for the Bassmaster Kayak Championship the year prior, needed a way to get our kayaks and fishing gear out to South Carolina so that we could fly in and save a week of driving. Well, thanks to the powers that be, we loaded our kayaks and fishing gear on some pallets, threw them in a Sierra Nevada beer truck, which would drive straight across the country to Mills River, North Carolina, their other brewery location, which just happened to be a couple hours away from our tournament location. How perfect was that? Shortly after that, Mike, myself, and our biggest cheerleader, Beer Santa, boarded a plane and made our way to South Carolina for the 2022 Bassmaster Kayak Championship in conjunction with the Bassmaster Classic. Man, it was a grind of a week with getting there, having to drive up to get the kayaks, the gear, assemble everything, but it was also nice to visit the Mills River Brewery, see our buddy Tyler from Big Adventures, which ironically was 5 minutes down the road, and the place where they make all of my plastic boats. But we made it work. We got on the water, we fished, we practiced hard, and although Mike and I didn't find anything too promising, we were optimistic that maybe, just maybe, throughout the 2 days of tournament competition, we could do well enough to crack the top 10, which top 10 would get to go on the Bassmaster Classic stage for a few minutes of glory. I'll say Mike was good at catching fish out of our backyard, but had a little rougher time on tournament day. Myself, same old story, right place, right time, right fish, and some last minute heroics. After a subpar day one, I ended up having a big day two with some last hour key culling moments and somehow squeezing in by the narrowest of margins into the top 10, 10th to be exact, and making the Bassmaster Classic stage for the awards. It was a super cool moment, and more importantly, it was just an amazing trip with Mike and Terrence that I'll never forget. It also helped that we didn't have to drive all the way back, so we just put our kayaks and our gear back in the Sierra Nevada beer truck, where they'd meet us back in California. I'm still not actually sure if we were allowed to do that. Oh well. Another fun and busy summer, I ended up getting another kayak, or really just an upgrade to what I already had, but via the Wizards Creations for a super cool rig that a lot of my kayaks are pretty much designed after today. Happy to have the new kayak, but at this point, the garage is starting to look like I have a little bit of a hoarding problem. That summer, O and I took another shot at the UFC Frogs Only tournament, and while falling a little short on day two, we had some absolutely epic moments, some big smiles, and yeah, the boat also broke down again. I finished up the year shooting a promotional video for Sierra Nevada, least I could do, right? After they took our kayaks across the country and back. But shout out to Nick from the Bass Hookup YouTube channel for lending us his private property's pond and ultimately making it a successful shoot. I even managed to put the filmmaker on his first topwater fish to close out the day, so overall a win-win. Closing out 2022, we flipped the switch and we moved away from the bass and actually took the kayaks out to the ocean a couple times, looking for some rockfish, lingcod, species of that sort. I actually joined Mike's family on Thanksgiving, which very appreciative of, for a memorable trip where we caught some nice lingcod and reds for some killer fish tacos, but also having the unfortunate documented moment of Mike flipping his kayak 10 feet from shore. I love you, Mike. Now I want to say the not so happy or joyous moment of the year happened when the crew and I made our way to Timber Cove with the kayaks to do some more saltwater fishing right before Christmas and try to load up the freezers. Well, we learned a few things that trip. One, my friend's snoring abilities are unmatched. And thus the reason we now have a designated snorers only room for any Airbnb, hotel, or place that we stay. And number two is that I probably won't be venturing to the ocean anytime soon after what was pretty much concluded by you guys in the comments that I had a freaking great white shark go underneath my kayak.
Holy shit, dude.
Yeah, definitely glad I brought a change of underwear that trip. But overall, 2022 was another epic year filled with good friends, adventures, and fishing, but 2023, little to my knowledge, will be one of the best tournament years I've ever had. It started out hot, getting a victory up at Lake Shasta for the California Bass Nation event, which, by the way, we saw some crazy conditions, but man, that lake and I over the years just seemed to get along, so it was nice to get a win at the first tournament of the year. The tournament momentum continued, seemingly doing well and placing more often than not, and I felt like I was just in a groove, and my fishing was continually improving, but more importantly, the tournaments were just lining up, the lakes were just lining up with the way, the style I like to fish, and I just had a lot of confidence. Of course, we did the yearly spring trip trip to New York, and that place just seems to get better and better each year, which is wild. Shortly after that, I did attend my first iCast that summer, where I introduced the new Titan X series with some pretty epic filming and frog fishing, and also just going to the show, seeing what it's all about, which was pretty neat. Overall, an awesome first iCast experience and a fun week. We also fished the UFC once again that summer with O, and wouldn't you know, I managed to break his boat once again. But at this point, through other trips, not just tournaments, Root Beer has broken down on us more times than we can count, and she is, without a doubt, the most famous boat on the California Delta, a living legend at this point. The summer of tournaments continued to go super well, just one of those years where it felt like I could do no wrong on tournament day, which is definitely a rare feeling to have, but hey, I'll take it. Some epic fishing and catches at Clear Lake and another top 10 finish, and we actually, after that tournament, were in first place for the Angler of the Year standings for Yakabass, though there were a few guys hot on our tail, and essentially could come down to the last couple of tournaments. Well, it did. It ended up coming down to the last tournament of the year, the TOC Tournament of Champions on Lake Berryessa, and that was the biggest roller coaster of emotions I've ever had in a two-day tournament. On day one, with two small fish, 30 minutes left to go, I was pretty much crying and kissing my AOY hopes goodbye. However, wouldn't you know, last-minute heroics hit the absolute lottery, and in the last 30 minutes found a school of feeding fish right next to me, was able to not only catch my limit, but cull up once and get a solid score for day one. Day two, I kept my composure, caught 5 fish, called up a few times, and finished the job sealing my first ever Angler of the Year in California. So yeah, I mean, with the field out here as good as people are, the competitors, it felt like a pretty big accomplishment for me, and obviously an amazing way to end the year. 2024, this was the first year I actually did a presentation, or more of a meet and greet Q&A at ISE, International Sportsman's Expo in Sacramento. Actually, it was Mike and myself under a small tent in a rainstorm where we reflected on really a lot of YouTube videos and content over the years with the adventures and the things we had shared. And it was super cool, really, just to have a formal place to meet people who watched the channel, enjoyed what we did, and of course, to ask some great questions. It was an interesting spring tournament-wise. I managed to catch the biggest bass I've ever caught out of Clear Lake during the Native No Limit event and win an hourly big fish for it. We fished a dreadfully wet and cold tournament at Lake Tulloch while staying in a cabin without any heat and trying to remedy that with a propane gas stove. Maybe not a great judgment call, but I'm happy to report that we all woke up the next morning and none of us appear to have any long-lasting brain damage. I fished Salt Springs Valley Reservoir for the first time that spring as well for a 2-day Gambler Series event and managed on day one to catch the biggest tournament bag I'd ever caught with 101.25 inches. However, day two I managed to completely crap the bed, not even catch a limit, not adjust, completely fail, downward spiral, and fall way down the standings. Luckily, after that tournament debacle, my yearly New York trip was next, and that pretty much went as planned, catching giant largemouth, but also getting into some pretty big smallmouth for the first time, catching them on beds, catching them on glide baits, and just exposed me to another incredible element of fishing in New York that I had no idea was even there. I got back to California for the summer, fished the Delta quite a bit, including the Ultimate Frog Challenge, but not with O. This time Root Beer actually was in the hospital, so I found an alternate partner, our tournament director James. We did okay, actually, cashed a check, but we did also manage to break another boat. We all had another amazing trip to Clear Lake, which if you're counting, this is our 8th trip now at this point, and the bite was fantastic. Flipping toolies with a big rod and pulling out big fish will never get old, and as always, it was just a really solid, fun trip with the crew. The fall of 2024 was pretty neat in that it was what started out as an impromptu trip with Obedy after getting seasick in the ocean with Alden, and turning into a challenge series dubbed the OG Challenge. We went on to film a total of 9 episodes over the next 4 months on different bodies of water in Northern California, and having some pretty epic moments, and some not so great ones too. OG Show 10 is still to be determined, by the way, and should be returning this fall if anyone was curious, so stay on the lookout for that. And as far as the remaining tournaments went for 2024, well, it was probably the worst stretch I'd ever experienced, not doing well in any tournament, not even catching a limit most of the time, and pretty much by the end of it, I was ready for tournament season to be over for that year. And now we're here, 2025. Although it's almost over, it's been nothing short of amazing, and probably one of the more traveled and adventure-filled years I've had. We got started off doing something totally different and unique. The crew and I went to ISE, and instead of a tiny little tent with a Q&A, we actually got up on the Bass Tank and did a formal Q&A with hundreds of people in the crowd, giving out almost 700 raffle tickets and awarding to one lucky winner a brand new Titan X. That weekend, it was honestly crazy to see how many people just came out, showed support, meeting everyone, signing shirts, signing beer cans, taking photos. It really was a special moment for myself and the crew, and we definitely felt the love that weekend. But yeah, this year was pretty adventurous. I got to go to Texas and basically fish and eat barbecue for a week straight, as well as shoot my first pig there, which was an experience in itself. Then immediately following that, go to New York, where I'd catch some of the biggest smallmouth of my life. So yeah, that spring, not too shabby. I got back to California just to turn around and hop on a plane to San Diego, where the fellas and I embarked on a 3-night charter trip in the Pacific Ocean in search of bluefin tuna. And although I never quite got my sea legs, man, what an adventure that was. One that I'll never forget, memories for a lifetime. I'll just say, I've been eating pretty good with some killer ceviche and tuna steaks after that trip. Soon after the charter trip was over, I hopped on another plane and went to Florida to spend a week at ICAST. Didn't film or upload anything from that trip, but I got to check out the new Native Hammer coming out this fall, catch up with some old friends, make some new ones, and overall just another fun week in the fishing industry. And now, quite literally now, we're here in this moment of time, and really the point of all this, me telling you the story, bringing you along for the journey for all these years, is to express how grateful I am that back in 2013 I decided to pick up a GoPro and a fishing kayak and post all of my fishing adventures on this platform. I've been able to share with this community everything that I've gone through in this journey, where there's been many highs and certainly many lows. I've been able to share what happens outside of fishing, new friendships that were formed and will last a lifetime, all the good times that we've had, and some of the crazy adventures throughout. Thank you to you guys, everyone out there, the viewers. I'm incredibly grateful for this community, and this community is one that I personally think is like the best out there. I honestly don't know how much longer I'll continue to do YouTube. I'm not saying that I'm looking for an end in sight, but just being realistic. I don't know. Things happen, life changes, and you can never really predict the future, but not just for this video, but all videos before this, all videos to come. Again, thank you guys. I feel so incredibly fortunate. Like I always say, I appreciate you guys watching, for coming along, and I will see you in the next one.